So now that we have the breeds rendering on the page and we are successfully updating this on the reducer as well, as you can see, we now can then fetch the subbreed list. So what I need to do is go into the app.tsx again. And in here, because we have fetched the dogs data, we can now fetch the subbreed list as well. So after this block here, I'm going to do an if check. So if the breed state, so the app breed state is not equal to all, so initially it is all, but it will change when we change that, and then we have access to the amended breed state. And I'm just going to use the use selector hook again to get access to the dog store and also the breed state. So if I import the use selector hook and the root state from my reducer file, so now I have access to the breed state, and if it is not equal to all in this block, I now want to make a fetch request to the subbreed list this time, and I'm going to do await. And if I just go into my API file, so it is in lib api.ts, and the function is called fetch dog subbreed, and we need to pass in a breed, so we have that in the reducer now. So back into my app.tsx, so await fetch dog subbreed, and we pass in the breed state as the argument, and we also need to import this in from the API. Then essentially we just need to copy this here, so underneath paste the dot then. So now we want to set, instead of set breed list, we want to set subbreed list to the data.message and set is loading to false. And then now what we can do is pass in the subbreed list into the dog form component, so we have access to that here, and we will be receiving that also. If I now save all, I also want to memoize the data. So essentially we are getting a use effect in here. So instead of fetching the data every single time, I want to add in a use callback hook in here, which memoizes the data. So only essentially what it does is it catches the data unless we pass in a certain dependency that we need to look out for. If that dependency is changed, then we want to refetch the data again. So use callback from React, and this is going to be passed as a wrapper across, and at the end we want to put a dependency in here. And if I import this from React, and now it will tell me either include it or remove the dependency array. So we want to include the breed state. So what we want to do is we only want to fetch the data when the breed state changes. So now in here, I want to pass in fetch data as a dependency. So if fetch data now changes, then we need to rerun the use effect again and fetch the data. And within the fetch data function, we are passing in a use callback in here to look out for the breed state. If that changes, then we want to fetch the data once again. What I am also going to do is pass in the breed state in the use effect also. So now what has happened there is it has removed the TypeScript error from here also. So now this block of code is going to change when we change the breed state. So essentially when we change this, then we will refetch the data once again. So if I save all into my dog form component, I now will be receiving the prop for the subbreed list. So if I copy this and paste this in the console log, I also want to remove this console log and this one also. And now if I save and I go into my console and refresh the page, if I was to select a breed that has a subbreed in it, then we will make a network request to the fetch subbreed API. So if I was to select Australian, which has subbreeds, as you can see, it has a shepherd as a subbreed in here. So we now just need to render the UI for this drop down. So if I just delete this comment here, and essentially I want to almost copy this drop down and paste this underneath, and instead of select a breed, we want to select a subbreed this time. And now what we want to do is on change, we now need to create a new function named render subbreed this time, passing in the target value, and then the value will be the subbreed state. So if I change this to subbreed state, and we need to now access this in our Redux store as we did with the breed state. So if I go back up, and now I need to declare this, so const subbreed state is equal to the dog store, optional chaining, and then dot, and then as you can see the subbreed here. And we also need to create the dispatch for this now. So const render subbreed, and this will take in a value again of a string. It's the same function, and what we are going to do is essentially dispatch the subbreed as the value, and the action type in this case will be action type dot subbreed, like so. What I also want to do is when we change the main breed, then we want to set the payload for the subbreed back to all. So if I copy this and paste this in the render breed function, and the payload this time will equal the string of all, like that. Now render subbreed is going to dispatch a value that we pass in. So in here we are passing the e.target.value, and then the option in this case will be select subbreed, and this will be singular. And now if I just comment out the breed list mapping for now, and if I now save all, we should now see the subbreed being rendered out on the page. So if I select this, we can now see the subbreed. So all we need to do now is if we are getting a subbreed, we need to map through it. So if I go up to subbreed list, like so, and then uncomment this out, and because this time the subbreed is an array and not an object, we don't need to do objects.keys anymore. So we can just paste in the subbreed list. And I also want to check for a length. If it has a length, then we want to map through the subbreed list, passing through the breed and the index. So in this case, the breed will have a type string, and then the index will have a type of number. And then the option value for this one is breed, or we can name this subbreed, which I will do. Control D subbreed, like so. And then again, within the option is going to be the subbreed, and then the key is the index, which is of type number. Now if I save, we should now have the shepherd being rendered. And I want to go into my Redux store once again, and we have the breed set, and the action is Australian. So now what we want to do is when we select shepherd, we want a new action to be dispatched named set subbreed. So if I select that, the subbreed is now selected as shepherd. If we go into the state of the app, we now have Australian and shepherd there. So now we have the first two drop downs of the breeds being rendered. There's one more drop down to look at, which is the numbers one. So what I'm going to do is after this drop down here, I'm going to create a new drop down. So if I just copy this drop down again and paste this underneath, the title this time that we are passing is going to be number of images, like so. Again, show error is going to be false, and then the children in this case, we want to now create a render number function like so, and we need to create that at the top. So if we scroll to the top, and then it's going to be const render number, which again takes in the value. So I'm going to pass all of this across, paste that in. It takes in a value, but this time we're going to dispatch the action of number instead. And now we have that all there. We have a function for render breed, render subbreed, and render number. If I go back down to my number drop down, the number of images, I'll give this as a capital. So the value this time will be the number state. So number state, which we need to get from the Redux store. So if I go back to the top, and underneath const number state is equal to dog store optional chaining dot number, and then pass that in as the value, which we have done. So now within the option, what we now need to do is we need to create a counter list of going from 1 to 50, and there are many ways you could do this. The way I am going to do this is with the array.from method. So if we create an array.from here, and in this array.from we are going to pass in two arguments. First is going to be a length argument of 50, that's what we want, and then the second argument we are going to put in a underscore because we don't need the first parameter, and then we need the index, and then this will have a callback, and we want to implicitly return an option once again. And the value for this option will be the index plus 1 because it starts off from 0 with JavaScript. And then also with this option, we want the key, which is equal to the index once again. And then if I just copy this and render this out within the option, so the index plus 1 is the option value. So now we have a list of 1 going through to 50, and whatever we select in there, it dispatches the action and runs the function render number. So then again, we will dispatch the set number action this time and update the store accordingly. So if I now save, we now have the number of images being rendered out on the page. And then if I was to select 7, we now have the set number as the action payload as 7. And then the state of the app is now spreading the initial state, so the Australian and Shepherd. And then we are also adding 7 to it as well. And then that is also being rendered out in the UI also.